talking to Oksana Vovchenko today,
Hello.
and our topic is how COVID has changed our civilization. Hi.
Yes, it would be interesting to discuss now when some time passed since then. Actually, I'm not sure if we are able to estimate actual changes, but let's try. I remember how at the very beginning of the pandemic, we thought that the world will be never the same again. But from the first sight, right now, I do not see just crucial changes, except one, digitalization. What
Yeah,
do you think? Has the COVID changed our civilization or not?
yeah, probably yes. Probably yes. And there are a lot of aspects as any major disaster that happens to humanity. It has so many implications. We need to have a systemic approach. Let's talk first about the obvious things about health system, and then communication, and then probably economy as well. So in terms of health, it was a huge challenge. The mortality was quite high. It is easy to criticize right now what was wrong and what was right, even though still there is no definite answers whether things were done right or wrong. But obviously, the excessive mortality was very substantial. We can connect about 6 million people deaths to COVID directly, and the excessive mortality in total in the world, as the World Health Organization has reported, was around 15 million excessive mortality. So it's a huge loss. And when it's just, we're talking about numbers, but every single life was a great loss for the person who died, for his relatives, for the society. So it can be compared to the numbers that were lost for a couple of countries in Second World War. So let's start talking about the sources of this trouble. Obviously, there are so many conspiracy ideas. How did it happen? Was it intentional? Wasn't it intentional? It doesn't matter at this stage anymore. It was maybe important when it was developing. Right now, it doesn't really matter. Well, was it intentional or unintentional? Was it a biological experiment that went wrong, or was intentionally done that way, or it was a natural disaster? We needed to treat it the same way, and obviously we didn't do well. We certainly didn't do well. In terms of the treatment, the attempt to flatten the curve, it's hard to say how well did it work. Maybe it had temporary benefits, but later on, all those that didn't get contracted the disease, they did get this disease later on. saying that the later versions of the virus were less deadly. We might say this as well. The main concern that I have is that the approach that we had to isolate people was probably not very good idea, because many of them didn't get the regular care, very simple regular care that should be provided to the patients when they are experiencing a serious respiratory distress, disease, like simplest ways to contain the fever, to make sure that they have access to the oxygen, to the agents that allow to open their bronchi and things like that. Maybe in a lot of cases, people could have been, if not saved, but at least the percentage of those that got to the stage that they had to be hospitalized and ventilated, maybe this percentage would be lower if the regular care would be provided to people that otherwise were locked out in their houses. Another thing is that nobody really paid attention. There was a tremendous success to develop a specific antiviral medication, Paxlovid, developed by the same firm that was providing, was the major provider of the vaccines, Pfizer. Paxlovid is acting on all kinds of coronavirus infection, all variants. It doesn't matter which variant, it stops the virus from duplicating, replicating. And if it is taken within 5 days after the onset of the major symptoms, the success rate is very high. I have experienced it on myself. And when I got contracted the COVID, I've taken it, and it was very mild, and I got cured. The first time I got sick was right in the beginning, and I was very sick and I almost died. Back then in 2020, in January, nobody really knew what was this thing. I had luck to get it from one of my visitors. I had a lot of meetings in the office without windows in the high-rise building. And I was interviewing like about 25, 30 people in 1 or 2 days, 15 minutes each. And probably I got it from someone out of this 25, 30, because as we were told, 15 minutes in confined space was enough to contract the disease. So back then there was no diagnostics, no nothing. I got the pneumonia. It was the hardest sickness I ever had in my life, but I survived. So out of all the measures that we have seen, Paxlovid actually was the ultimate success. For some reason, it was not used as much as it could have been used. Even when it appeared, the governments continued to insist to use the vaccinations rather than to treat the population with Paxlovid to make it more available. In Canada, it was hard to get. even though it was provided for free, which I can praise the government because the price for this treatment is around $700. But in order to qualify, you would need to be not vaccinated, which was my case, and have certain diseases that would put me in a risk group. And there were 2 stages of the verification. Not only the family doctor should have verified this, but also the pharmacist was supposed to check whether I fall under the category of the risk groups. So it wasn't easy to get. I did get it, and I used it. And it's hard to imagine what it would be if I would. It's a pity that the most of the effort wasn't put into this kind of treatment development, that if that would be developed earlier, that would be very good. And also, obviously, it was developed earlier because if it got the approval in 2021, 22, November 21, I think, 21. Yeah. They should have do all the efforts towards this direction. Another thing, we can say that vaccinations were not efficient. They were not efficient. We did know that from the beginning, that usually with viruses like this, vaccinations are not efficient because they have a very high rate of an ability to change and mutate. And at the time when we roll out the vaccine, usually the variant that we are facing at that time is way more different than the vaccine that has been developed. In terms of scientific approach, that the vaccines that has been used, they were absolutely innovative, some of them, so-called RNA vaccines, where the material that's supposed to ignite the immune response was not given directly to the patient, but rather the cells were so-called infected with certain RNA, which was used to produce certain elements of the virus, because it was needed, because those elements of the virus, especially proteins, they have to fold to certain shapes while being synthesized within the cell. And we cannot provide those proteins directly, okay? We need them to be produced by the cell. It was an innovative thing. It wasn't used in humans before. It did fail. Of course, it got a lot of scientific material to study. Maybe in future times when it will be needed to develop vaccines against other kind of agents, it can be very successful. We don't know what the side effects of those vaccines could have been. Long-term side effects are not known. The FDA regulations were very they have been overcame easily compared to the same kind of treatment that would be normally tested for maybe tens of years before it would be rolled out to a general population. So that's what I can say about the medical side of it. What do you think?
I'm afraid I'm not that strong in medical knowledge. But from all what you say, what has changed? Let's focus on changes. What is now very different from what we had before 2020? I mean about civilization. Has healthcare system changed drastically or substantially?
It's in different countries, it is different. In some countries, they were trying to build more hospitals to provide more beds, hospital bed. In Canada, I didn't hear about such effort. By the way, we still have a substantial number of cases of pretty hard sickness connected to COVID. It is not covered anymore in the news. But from our anecdotal experience, we can hear here and there people that get sick, and even young people that get sick and even get hospitalized. God forbid, not that many dead, but it's still ongoing. How it changed the health system? Did they learn something from what they did? Of course, because they had experience of treating thousands and thousands of people. I think that they have learned certain things from this. Whether their actions were right as a response to such a threat, it is very hard to say. We can just say intuitively that it was not very efficient, that it has made more damage than the relief, especially the approach to isolate people, to cancel all elective surgeries, planned surgeries, not to treat people as it used to be with chronic disease. And that's how we can explain the excessive mortality from the diseases that could have been either prevented or treated, but were not treated because of the overload of the medical system, of health system, and canceling out all other normal activities. The positive thing is that the efficiency of the doctors, the family doctors, became higher because now it's a normal practice to have appointments over the phone. There are the ability to have appointments over the video link as well. And this way it becomes way more efficient rather than it was before. So maybe,
can you share
yes.
Ukrainian experience? What has changed for Ukraine? Just because I know, right? Pandemia required a huge database. It required digitalization of our medical data in order to control vaccination and family and unite that with appointment with family doctors and keeping all the documents. So the very first year, there was a boom of development of a common digital medical system, which is called Healthy in Ukraine. It's a very good application, very convenient one, where you can book an appointment with doctors, not just with family doctor, with any specialization doctor, get a video meeting like telemedicine. You can keep and store all your medical documents within that application, and you can record your vaccination schedule and track the vaccination schedule. So that was a sure positive change from my view. And government invested huge funds to develop this program, this application. So that really has changed for Ukraine and Ukrainian clients.
Yeah, what we heard on the news, the vaccine that Ukraine has bought from India was not very good, and they did want to use the Russian vaccine before that. It's very hard, you know, it's very biased, and we can argue this way or another way with the same success. In general, it is a positive outcome. The system became more efficient, more digitalized. But on other hand, I don't know if they learned from the fact that you should not make privileged diseases to be treated and others not to be treated, because it should be the same. If the person dies, it's a problem and we need to prevent it. So all those cases of MI, heart disease, kidney disease, all other cases when people didn't get a proper treatment and their health got bad and they died. I don't know if the system actually learned those mistakes and they will not repeat them anytime soon when it is facing the new challenge. So I don't know if they learned it. They having a hard time to admit that things were done wrong. And since if they are not admitting that the things are done wrong, they will very easily repeat the same mistakes. So the good cold-headed research and analysis is really, really needed in order to determine what was good approach and what was bad approach. Because we can see that such things can happen again, and we don't want the repetition of the same mistakes.
Another thing which I consider to change significantly is office work culture. I think that we have got more flexibility in this. After having all this experience working remotely and within international teams, now office culture has changed, I think, very much. More and more companies apply more flexible approach to building teams, to require working hours and schedules. And I think that now we occupy less office space and let people to work from where they feel comfortable to work.
So absolutely right. Even the fact that we are doing those meetings via Zoom as the result of this, it has become very acceptable. The technology was there for a long time, but our old ways of thinking of how the things should be, they were different. Yes, the office communication became way more efficient. The borders between the countries becoming less visible and less important in those communications. It's easier to work across the borders, easier to build the teams. People got the experience of working remotely. They got used to do these things. It can be only praised. It is very efficient and very good for business. Also, it makes people more independent, uh, more contractor-like. They can get multiple employers at the same time, trying to serve them. They have to be more efficient, being in this format.
Yes, I think this change is really very, very big when one person can be employed with several companies. It's something what we should focus on. It was not usual a couple of years ago.
Well, if the companies learn that the person is employed by a couple of companies, they might not like it. But here is the fact: if the person can satisfy,
It depends on how you position yourself. If you, from the very beginning, if you declare yourself as self-employed, you are allowed to be employed with a number of companies. The only criterion is not absence of conflict of interest. So I cannot be employed within competing companies. If they are not competing companies, that's fine. Just do your
what
job.
really, yeah, absolutely. What really irritated most of us, the legislations and the forceful measures that has been forced upon us, with those limitations that we did have. The quarantine is known to the society for a very long time. It was always forceful. Like from the medieval times until now, we know that it was that way. But we can say that a lot of measures were excessive and didn't reach their goals, and they were very annoying to people. Also, we need to admit that the mental health has deteriorated drastically because of depression, the fact that everybody has been locked in their houses. A lot of divorces happened because of this. A lot of conflicts. And it's very questionable how justified all those policies were, truly.
Yes, I agree. We faced, first of all, we first human rights violation. And we need to rethink the roots of our democracies, actually, because what we observed was not democratic rules at all. Democracies all over the world and human rights were violated even in the most developed countries. I would say that especially at the most developed countries, human rights were more violated.
That's true. And it's very worrying fact. It just have shown how clueless we are against such things. Like anyone who wants to really disturb the civilization just has to start the new virus or something like that, and it will cause the same degree of disturbances. It gives bad ideas to a lot of bad people. A lot of bad people can try to repeat those things because the governments they have overdone themselves in limiting the ability to run businesses. Here we are coming to the economy that had a huge blow. Another thing is that it have shown how economy is strong. and how society is strong, that it actually can allow to itself for over a year not to do the usual business as usual, and still survive somehow. It also have shown how many things we don't really need, like excessive travel. We can deal without this travel, and a lot of travel is just doesn't have to happen, and it gives an idea that we can arrange our lives more efficiently and less be exposed to all those consequences of excessive use of travel and resources and things like that. That's why when we were discussing the ecological aspects at one of our podcasts with you, I said that the first thing is not to think how to reduce pollution, but to think how to reduce the consumption. We are sources of garbage. We're sources of huge sources of pollution, not because we are bad, because our system is based on consumption, more consumption, and even more consumption. And these have shown that we don't need that much consumption, at least in the travel sector, in the restaurant sector. On the other hand, we have this delivery frenzy. Everything we're getting delivered, and it's get in the boxes that we need to dispose all the time, and it creates a lot of garbage as well. Not that much garbage that we would be having probably if we would just go in and buying things rather than ordering them. Sometimes Amazon is sending a huge box with a lot of filling material for a small item, and we need to dispose of all this. It's another thing that it has developed the delivery part of the economy, which makes life more efficient and easier.
Yes, it was interesting experience from economic point of view. And it was really amazing how economics really survived. It coped with all these challenges. And from my opinion, markets showed that markets serve these better than governments. Actually, governments look incapable to do anything. They had no plans, they had no decisions, they had no idea what to do, and markets regulated all of that themselves. So for me, it was another proof that markets more flexible, and we need markets to regulate, to react to such challenges.
It's a very general statement to make a statement about markets during 2-3 years of such a difficult times with a lot of changes, and it's hard to say.
But they happened spontaneously. I mean, they were not planned by governments or like special policies or regulations or some regulated control.
Markets are quite violent and illogical. They react to the news. Sometimes they overreact to the news. Sometimes they do not understand the news and they react first and then they try to understand. Markets are a lot of trouble in a lot of senses. When the successful companies, but being put out to the market, they can get substantial difficulties, because if the market falls, then even their stock will fall, right? and their capitalization is way lower than it would be. So it's like letting to your house a wild beast and saying that everybody else is afraid to come to your house because you have it, and bragging that you have this wild beast in your house. But still, it makes a lot of trouble, Inefficiency of the governments, yes, they're very inefficient, very stupid, uh, very excessive in what they do, inefficient again. And
There is one thing that which government really did. They regulated money supply. They regulated money supply in order to prevent system from the collapse. The economic system was formed with excessive money supply just to let things go. And we've got into inflation race. Actually, what we've got after all of that, inflation race, when each country just tried to overcome inflation of other country in order to stay competitive in the market. And for 2 years, even US dollars, which is supposed to be the most stable currency, showed at least 8% of inflation. In my opinion, it was even higher, but officially declared 8%. And all other countries showed even more, 30, 50, 100% of inflation. So it got something very similar to 70s, but at the same time different. And only now we start to stop this inflation race, to slow it down. And only for the next year, I read plans for slowing down inflation, even here in Canada, to slow it down to 4%.
yeah, but
it was important that during inflation race, financial instruments do not work. We cannot use traditional financial instruments. They do not work. If you put your money on deposit into bank, it's useless. That's nonsense. And so on and so on. That was also an interesting experience, which we not went through, but still is going through. And we still cope with these consequences of that money supply regulation.
Canada was especially good in giving out the money. About 7 million people received $2,000 each month, more or less, for over a year and a half. It has illustrated that the government can make the basic income and not to collapse, which was a surprise to me a little bit. They were given the grants and the loans that were very easy to receive, especially at first. A lot of money was misused. Now I think it's futile to try to regain this money by the government. I do not understand why our governments ignore this simple idea that I am trying to convey to everybody about the universal automatic tax on all transactions. That could be the solution for so many things. I have discussed it with many people, and even artificial intelligence, and none of them can actually explain to me why it is not done. The excuses even that artificial intelligence give, it says it will require a lot of changes in the legislation. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Yeah. So is this the reason not to do this? Because it's a lot of changes needed in legislation. I talked to a lady here our channel, she used to work in the Ministry of Finance in Ukraine. And she said that they wouldn't change it. She means the oligarchs and everybody in top of the power, because they will afraid to lose the flexibility to influence the system to their benefit. Which means that they're stupid. They won't be able to understand how easy it is, so they don't want to change anything because they're happy with what they have already. But I don't really understand why this is not done. It is so simple. It is so obvious that would benefit almost everybody. It will add so much stability. It is so similar to how the living healthy organism works, that is taken automatically whatever it needs from the system that delivers, and it gets back whatever it doesn't need. So why we're not doing this? Why so much things are getting lost in between? Why to expect people to go and report their incomes, not to cheat on this, not to try to avoid paying taxes? Why to tax those that are the middle class, automatically deducting this money from their wages, while the upper class and the poor don't pay a dime, because the upper class finds the way how to not to pay anything, and the poor just not set to pay anything, and everything, or the whole burden is on the middle class. The middle class, the most active class that could have participated in economy way more if they would have this extra funds. This extra funds is taken, and I don't know. Up until now, I never got the definite explanation why this idea is not used. Why it's so simple, it's so obvious. I don't know.
Yes, I understand that uninstall the previous system is harder than to build this new system from the ground up.
Yeah.
And that is why, for example, Germany still has railroads everywhere. No, any other country used that, just because sometimes they install
But what I
and it's
suggest, you
hard to
don't need
change.
you
And
don't
what we
need
see now
to.
in Africa, for example, why Africa is a perspective area for us, because we can build the newest system there from ground up. There is no need to uninstall what was built previously. And they get a great success, starting from communication, telecommunication. They start from G5 immediately.
What I know is that people still dying from hunger in Africa, and that there are some places where they still eat humans, cannibals. That's what I know about Africa. So if they do it by using 5G, I'm very happy for them. But the main idea is to decide how we would like to develop our societies, and only then to decide whether we need all this infrastructure and hardcore things to build. Like the same here, there is no concept of a future living that would be generally acceptable. Like obviously we are heading towards troubles if we concentrate people in the cities. We need to dismantle the cities, especially when we are talking about the global warming. There are so many cities will be underwater soon. So why don't we start moving people out of the cities, allowing them to live in other places? We need to decide how we build self-sufficient, self-propel, economically sound dwellings, houses. Instead of thinking how you do it on Mars, think how you can do it here in Canada. I've traveled Canada from sea to sea and back, and it's very empty country, with more or less mild zones where the climate is not that bad or worse than the climate in the places where we have mega cities like Montreal and like Toronto. So we have a lot of land. We just don't know how to use this land. And if we build those smart houses that would provide for the inhabitants everything they need, including the growing food, including the electric power from the solar power, from the wind power, the combined sources of green power, no need for things to be delivered, 3D printing, for example, which will allow not to use Amazon every day with the delivery problem. So we need to build this house of the future that would allow people to settle quite independently in different parts of these vast lands that we have, for example, in our country and many other countries, we still have those vast lands. And I would call it de-urbanization, with the global internet connection, thanks to ideas and implementation of those satellites that has been launched by Elon Musk. It will allow to have a very efficient internet everywhere, right? So we need to decide what do we need to do, because if we move towards this direction, that people can settle anywhere and those smart houses can be deployed very fast, okay, anywhere you want, and you don't need really good roads. And even if you have roads, for example, you have this trans-Canadian road going right across the country, but it's empty. There are no cities along this road. There is no nothing. If you really want to build, you can build a lot along this road. So I'm thinking of this vision of the future that should be given before we decide whether we need employment, we need infrastructure. Maybe we don't need neither of it. Maybe we can rearrange things slowly but surely in a way that it will be way more efficient. And also talking about the pandemics, if you have people separated that way, the pandemics will not be that troublesome. Imagine having people able to get very cheap land or even free land, and being able to implant pretty cheap houses based on virtual reality, ability to change it in terms of how they look inside and outside, so they can experience the change in their environment, so it's not too boring, it doesn't look like a prison for people, and the ability to be self-sustained, growing their own food, having their own sources of energy, gaining the water. For example, we have a lot of water in Canada. We have a lot of water in our atmosphere. Even in the desert, we have water. Here we have a lot of water. So You don't even probably need to do a well everywhere you come to get the water out. Maybe you can collect this water from the atmosphere with the wise devices that would be doing this, or using the lake water. We have so many lakes, so rainwater, to use rainwater, like to develop this unit for humans to live based on the principles that we have learned from COVID, that we can communicate distantly. We can do things distantly. It is not good to be in crowd. Crowd is a hazard. And we know that, when we have a crowd, it can kill people, crowd, even without intention to kill, just because they are the crowd. They can contract diseases from each other. They can have violence. You will have a difficulty to make a violent crime if everybody lives separately, right? Drugs, again, where you would get these drugs if you live far away from everybody. So let's think of this first, and then we can think of what these people supposed to do. Like my ideas of supporting each other, of signs of kindness. Then the small settlement of 20 people, you will always find what to do with these 20 people. Someone is old, someone is sick, and the basic income that the government would be provided using the taxation system that I suggest. This will be very natural, and it will be looking towards the things that the big cities is the hazard. The big cities is the trouble. We need to undo the big cities. We need to undo the big cities. So that's the direction that I would suggest. What do you think?
Yes, I agree that our large cities highlighted the problem of living together. We never before had such settlements, like 10 million people living in one place.
We haven't, but we
and we
had big.
discovered that we have no tools to stop pandemia in such big, large settlements. It's impossible. We cannot regulate that. And paradoxically, yes, being separated, we become more connected because of new technologies. We just invented new way to be connected. And now we even closer connected in this way. That's interesting paradox.
So I suggest to start from scratch, from the experience that we had with COVID, and to plan from scratch what would be the life of an average human on Earth in the future and how we can accommodate it. Maybe we need to discourage the travel. Maybe travel is not very good idea. If you can travel virtually, right now you can visit any part of the world through Street View on Google and see any street of the world and so on and so on. It will develop. It will develop even more. Maybe we need to discourage this tourism thing as well, because why would people travel so much when they cannot travel? And travel is the source of those pandemias and other problems as well. And like I said, self-sufficient living is very important and very good idea. Very good idea. It will really make people feel special, not separated, like you said, but more integrated, less condensed the feeling of the person in the crowd, on one hand, it can give you the powerful feeling of being a part of something huge. On the other hand, it can give you the feeling of how unimportant and minuscule your life and contribution is when you are just one of the thousand, right? So yeah, it will make people more individuals.
But I would also mention one problem which were really highlighted during pandemic, digital divide. I mean, digital gap. At that time, we really saw the problem. We faced the problem. There is digital divide in the world, and we need something to be done to overcome it. It is many-level digital divide between the countries, between cities and villages, between generations, between people of different level of income, between people of different level of education. And we just get this huge gap. It increased during pandemic. Those who could jump into technologies and use them, and those who could not do that. And one group get a huge advantage, and the other groups got disadvantages. So now we have to overcome this digital divide. And what I see here in Canada, that country really is doing a lot to overcome it, because I volunteered at Opportunity for Employment Center. That's a free service to help people get employed. They provide just large spaces with computers and free courses and free trainings, and us as volunteers who help people who come. They even have now emails. They do not know how to register with Google, for example. They cannot type their resume. They are not able to apply for job just because they cannot send resume. And I see how a lot Canada invest in these programs to train these people, to teach them.
But on the other hand, if we look at our community centers and our libraries, in some places they're huge, very expensive, and very, very empty. Probably they have been built at the times when access to the computers and to the books was not the same as we have right now with our mobile phone. If they would use the same money to help get people more exposed to the internet and new technologies on their smartphones, probably that would be the better use. I always go to my local library. First of all, I go there very not often. I like it. It's huge. It's like a palace. Huge. I think millions of dollars. You hardly find 20 people being in such a huge space at any given time. And most of the things are not used there. So it's just a waste of so much effort. And there are a lot of public places now that are empty, right?
Yes, maybe they need to analyze where to put resources better. Here I see the same picture. Yes, there is a library. It's very convenient. It's also equipped with the computers, and there are no people. And here, one block near that, Opportunity for Employment Center, also facilities with computers full of people. Why? Because they are motivated to solve their problem. They have where they go there,
where
right?
you are, our employment center is absolutely empty. And the same, you can get free copies, you can use the
What is my idea? Just to give people motivation, not to just give them facilities. Here you are, just come and no, if people are not motivated, they will not do. When they have a goal, they will come to get their goal. So better
Then they will get
analyze where
COVID.
to direct resources.
Then there they will get COVID. We like with the offices, we have a lot of office space which is empty now, and a lot of things we don't need anymore. We need to look at the future and think, what do we propose to a person, average person, how to live their lives? We don't dictate them how to do this, but at least we need to give them a appealing idea how to live their lives, right? And right now we don't have this obvious idea how to live their lives. And we need to develop that. And it's not that hard to develop. I was writing about it 13, 15 years ago in my book, The Future Beyond Imagination. All those ideas were even possible to implement back then, 15 years ago. Right now, we have the abilities way more developed to do this. But in these 15 years, we still are sticking to the same old concepts of getting people employed, getting people together, and it's outdated. And it's quite outdated. Yeah.
And I noticed one more change. It's about hygienic issues. What I see now that the standards are much higher, far higher now. And now everywhere
they say this word hygienic.
Yes, but now we really clean all surfaces with sanitizers. We never did that before.
I don't
It's
think
not,
that it's really
not against, that's good, not just against COVID. It's good itself because a lot of other diseases can be transferable because of lack of hygiene, usually.
Hygiene. Hygiene is hygiene.
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 Hygiene. Oh, okay. Hygiene.
Yes.
So
Don't worry, I've
we
learned this after 20 years living here.
hygiene. Great. So now I see that we pay more attention to keep everything clean everywhere in public places and even at home. It's very different. So we are cleaner humanity after
We are cleaner. But still, I suggest to separate from everybody and make the sustainable housing cheap, produced in great quantities, easily deployed. I would think of this. And supporting people to go and settle in this housing, having a clear idea what they're going to do there, having the idea what would be the source of the income, and yeah, I think this might be a very good idea, and I'm surprised people don't talk about it. I'm just maybe one of very few people who talk.
People do talk, and we even discussed this idea at our club.
But not politicians. I don't hear it from politicians. Politicians are just old school idiots.
Yes.
Even the younger ones. Anyways, it was a very interesting conversation. I congratulate you on getting a new career, a new job, and we will have a little, maybe a couple of weeks that we will not be doing those videos. And also, I would like to congratulate you that we have covered all the topics that we planned more than a year ago. And today was the last topic in this list. And the new list that we have created with the help of the artificial intelligence have very exciting topics. And I think we'll be doing great in future. And I'm very happy for you that you got this position you were looking for. And seriously, I congratulate you and wish you all the best. All the best. I think it's so great that in such a short time you have succeeded to do this. And it should be an example for everybody to use the difficult situations even to go farther forward rather than backward. All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.